Well, hello, everybody. It's Mike from Profiling Evil. Welcome aboard. Boy, what a day, huh? I can see that a lot of you have been reading and watching the news unfold about this arrest in Moscow, or in Moscow, the arrest in Pennsylvania, up in Monroe County. And boy, great news. And just want to say thanks to all of you for jumping in. There was some great comments in here. Southern Sass was first on this morning saying she was literally shaking when the news came out. And I actually got a call from an investigator in New York City who reached out and said, "Hey, did you see the news?" And I jumped on and have been following it since then. I was actually finishing up a video from last night. And so I'm going to start off. I wanted to start a little early to play a little bit of that video and talk about that and another case, and then be ready once the press conference starts to go into that with all of you. So hope you're doing well. And what a kind comment, Red Rock 59. Mike, you nailed it. Do you have a secret source? No, that's the profiling process. He says, you're a terrific profiler. Wow, thank you very much. Woohoo! And much respect, but who knows if we're right. We're going to still wait and see what happens. And Red Rock is kind of referring to the fact that from the beginning, I've been kind of pulling the reins back and saying, hey, I don't know if we ought to be looking so closely until more information comes out at one way or the other. The targeted known offender versus possibly the opportunistic offender. And I kept kind of leaning toward this idea of the possibility of opportunistic. And it's going to be interesting to see what unfolds in the press conference today. If we learn that this individual, Brian Christopher Koberger, was familiar with the area, familiar with the kids, if there is any history with the kids that led to this. And by the way, I got chewed out online for calling them kids. And thanks to those of you who are a little more senior in years, because that's what we do. Yes, young adults, adults, but these were kids that didn't certainly deserve what happened to them. And I think, Crystal, I'm going to side with you. Not only their poor parents, but imagine being the parent of someone who's named as a predator in something so horrific. Anyway, good. It's really good news. I want to try to kind of stay on target here and cover a couple of things to make sure that we're ready when the press conference comes up. And if they are dragging their feet on the press conference, we'll talk a little more. But thanks so much, everybody, for joining and being online. Please hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed to Profiling Evil, and make sure you're thumbs up on us and all of that stuff. But let's jump right into a video that I created this morning, hoping to put out today, not realizing that this was going to happen. Although last night I received a tip that the arrest was happening today. And boy, I'll tell you, sat on pins and needles waiting for this to unfold. But let's jump into this.
Breaking news this morning, we've confirmed police arrested a man in Pennsylvania for the murder of 4 University of Idaho students. The Associated Press says Brian Christopher Koberger is in custody. Pennsylvania State Police filed documents with the Monroe County Court saying Koberger is being held for extradition. The documents say that extradition order comes from an active arrest warrant for first-degree murder that Moscow Police and the Latah County Prosecutor's Office filed. We're learning this information just after Moscow Police announced they're hosting a press conference. That press conference will be at 1 this afternoon at Moscow City Hall. This is the first time they've hosted a press conference since November 23rd, over 1 month ago. The man police arrested in Pennsylvania seems to have a connection to WSU. This is Koberger's mugshot next to a photo of a man with the exact same name on WSU's website. He is a PhD student studying criminal justice. We called WSU to confirm this is the same person, and we're waiting to hear back. We will have the press conference live here on KREM 2 News at 1 this afternoon. We also will live stream the press conference on KREM.com.
Well, hey, folks, great news coming out of Idaho. An arrest has been made in that four-person murder case up at the university. We're going to share it live at 2 p.m. if everything works out. Hey, welcome aboard, Pat's Cats. But let's also talk for just a moment about a 22-year-old man who got 90 days in jail for shooting his 16-year-old girlfriend in the head, killing her. Somehow, the judge thought that this sentence was adequate. 90 days, with 45 of that being in a behavioral treatment center. The victim's parents, rightly so, were outraged. Well, hey, folks, this is an exciting day with the arrest in Moscow, Idaho, and those four college students who were brutally murdered. We're going to try to bring that live to you, but before we do so, I wanted to spend a moment and talk about the murder of Cece Castro down in Houston. I want to try to make sense of how the judge, who incidentally was thrown out by voters recently, justified the light sentence that he gave the kid who killed her, shocking her parents and the community. And then we're going to look into the latest as far as the Moscow murder investigation cleanup efforts that are going on. And again, police are going to announce that they've made an arrest. But let's talk about that Moscow cleanup first, because this means police are not going to be able to go back in that home and collect any more evidence. Now, depending on if they've gotten a confession, it may all be kind of moot at this point. But thanks for supporting us. Hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell, share us with your friends, tweet out with everybody about the arrest and the fact that they can watch it on Profiling Evil at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. And make sure you're using the hashtag pound Profiling Evil, that hashtag Profiling Evil, or at Profiling Evil. Well, let's get down to Houston for a moment. 20-year-old Alexander Valenzuela called 911 in April of 2021 to report that he'd shot and killed his girlfriend, Sienna. She went by Cece Castro. It happened just before 7 p.m. in the 11,000 block of Smoke Hollow Court. The murder occurred at the suspect's home, and initial reports led investigators to believe that the shooting was accidental. But once law enforcement arrived on the scene and started investigating, wow, things changed. Investigators shifted from the assumption that this was an accidental shooting, realizing it was a homicide. And that first tip came in the form of statements that the now convicted killer and his sister gave about the events leading up to Cece's death. Well, authorities discovered that Castro and Valenzuela were in a dating relationship. Physical evidence at the scene, coupled with conflicting statements by both Valenzuela and his sister, made cops think this wasn't an accident. And Valenzuela was arrested for the murder, and he soon faced the criminal justice system. He was given a $100,000 bail, but he was able to post a bond, and he was free through the trial preparations for the last year, but not anymore. Another blow was delivered to Cece's family when Valenzuela pleaded guilty just before the trial started, but he pleaded to aggravated assault. And in a really strange twist that I want to learn more about, the court allowed the guilty plea of aggravated assault to include aggravated assault against a family member. Well, Cece wasn't a family member, so I'd like to know more from anybody who knows about this case and why that designation was reached and approved of. Now, maybe there's a common law relationship that was going on, and it might make perfect sense once we learn more. But if you know something, let us know. But the wackiness didn't end there, folks. At the sentencing, the judge, who's only been judged for one term, and by the way, was not reelected a few months ago in the election, so he was out of a job in a couple of weeks, handed down a 90-day sentence. Cece's parents were outraged and they exploded in the courtroom. Her father was immediately escorted out of the courtroom, and her mother was told to sit there and be quiet. Well, after the hearing, the judge refused to comment on his ruling. But the defendant's attorney did show some compassion, in my opinion, by saying, quote, "I'm a father of 2 daughters. I can't imagine the pain that the family is going through. A tragedy will never feel justified," close quote. Well, what are your thoughts on this one, folks? Did the criminal justice system fail Cece Castro? And did it fail her family? Or did it end up doing the right thing? Personally, I want to congratulate law enforcement for recognizing that it wasn't an accidental shooting and charging Valenzuela with homicide, a guy who pled guilty. The prosecution probably did the right thing too by negotiating the case. But undoubtedly, they must have assumed that the killer would get a life sentence, not 90 days. So my question is, did the judge do the right thing? I'm going to be looking for your comments down below on this one, and thanks for taking time to enter your thoughts and taking time to respond to each other. Now, let's look at what's happening in Moscow. And again, they're going to be making this press release about the arrest. Huge news. But last night, Police Chief James Fry spent 60 seconds providing a short update on some developments about the crime scene and the place where those 4 college students from the University of Idaho were murdered.
I'd like to give a quick update to the community. Starting Friday morning, we are going to be bringing in a professional cleaning crew to go to the residents and begin cleaning. Part of the reason we're doing that is because of the biohazards as well as chemicals that were used during the investigation. So there will be activity over at that residence on King Road, and we just want people to know about that because we've received a lot more tips here recently, and we're continuing to investigate those and follow up on those. We've received over 19,650 tips. Email-wise, 9,025 of those have come in. Phone-wise, 4,575, and we've received over 6,050 digital tips. We want to thank the community for all their help and thank everybody across the nation for the help that they've given us.
The chief announced that while the home on King Road remains an active crime scene, a cleanup team that's going to be flanked by crime scene investigators and law enforcement is going to begin cleaning up the residence today, the place where those students were murdered. Now, this is creating quite a stir in the community, and there were a number of questions that were fielded last night on News Nation.
Welcome. So what does all of this mean for the investigation, and where do authorities go from here? Joining us now is Mike King. He is a 28-year law enforcement veteran and a former director of the Cold Case Foundation and host of the podcast Profiling Evil. And Rodney Demery, a retired Louisiana homicide detective and host of the series Murder Chose Me. And Joseph Scott Morgan, a forensic analyst, expert death investigator, and host of the podcast Body Bag with Joseph Scott Morgan. So thank you all for joining us this evening. I'd like to dive right in. We'll start with Mike. So tomorrow police are bringing in a professional cleaning crew. We heard that to the home on King Road. How long would a cleanup like this take? And once it is turned over to the homeowners, can investigators return if they need to?
Well, the cleanup could take an extended amount of time. I mean, we don't know what the extent of the DNA that was left, the body fluids that were left in that home, blood. We know that blood, once it heats up, is going to become permanent. So is that going to mean that they need to remove the flooring? Is it just they get the carpeting and the padding and they are able to clean up below that? And then how much work is it going to take to clean it up once they get inside? But we don't know that they're not going to be trying to collect additional evidence or having people on hand. So they could be stopping the cleaning action as they come across new pieces of information that seem appealing to them. And I'm glad to see my buddy Joe Scott on here to maybe talk about how that really impacts the amount of work that has to be done. And then absolutely, once it's turned over, it's going to depend on whether they have an agreement with the owners to go back in. And if they need to get back in, they're probably going to have to rely on all of the LiDAR they shot inside, all of the imagery that they collected, the crime scene diagrams that they made, and all of that's going to have to suffice in some way. And the big question I keep coming back with is, will they even keep this home or will they raise it?
Things of that nature. Okay. So, Joe, can you provide some context for us? 6 weeks have passed since the murders. Is that a typical length of time for a crime scene to remain active in a case like this?
Well, it's heavily dependent upon the nature of the particular event that occurred there. I've handled cases over the course of my career where I've had multiple homicides at one event, and the scene would be released pretty much, within a couple of weeks. We're heading out now into that 7th week. I just hope that they have put a lot of thought into this. I would imagine that the task force that's combined in this case, including the state police as well as the FBI and the Moscow police, have all conferred on this, and they've determined that the scene is in effect releasable, that they've collected everything. And to Mike's point earlier, they're going to have to get down into the carpeted areas, the subflooring, the padding, and all of that. And here's another thing. Remember, these individuals, these victims, were killed in a bedroom. That means that mattresses are involved. I have yet to see any video footage of them taking mattresses out of this environment. I hope that they've collected those, held onto those. In some cases, you'll even cut out drywall. And the headboards, if there are headboards, there could be dynamic blood staining that are on those surfaces as well. And once these individuals are inside this dwelling, once this cleanup crew is there, all bets are off at that point. You have to do everything that must have been done prior to the introduction of these civilians into this environment, because they're going to be doing a deep cleaning. All of that fragmented, fragile trace evidence is gone at that point.
Well, there isn't any indication from the property owner what their future plans are going to be for this piece of property. But what's clear is they can't make a decision until they get the house restored and settle the insurance. So this became another question on News Nation last night, and some follow-up questions surrounding whether this is a normal course of business for law enforcement or something out of the norm. Let's listen in on that exchange.
Really interesting. So, Mike, what does this mean for the investigation, this cleaning? Is this a normal next step, or is this investigation moving, would you say, into another phase completely?
I think it's both. I mean, it certainly is an eventual step. I mean, in some cases, school shootings where the government's owned the building, we've seen them hold on to a building until the trial. Clearly, that's not going to be the case in this particular investigation. And so they clearly believe that they have collected everything that they can, along with what they may collect during this cleanup period. And then it's going to be kind of a normal course of business. They're going to have to move into that next phase, and that next phase means there's no returning back in most cases, and so they're going to have to rely on what they've collected and what they've created. Well, there you go. Yesterday, Moscow police released more statistics regarding the investigation. They were stating that 20,000 leads have come in, 9,000 email tips, 4,600 telephone tips, and more than 6,000 digital media submissions. All of them need to be reviewed. And it prompted a question on News Nation last night about how law enforcement handles these kinds of massive volumes of tips and leads. Let's catch my response.
So, Mike, authorities have received almost 20,000 tips to date. What do they look for as they sort through them? How do they prioritize these tips?
Yeah, those are incredible numbers, aren't they, when you think about it? And this is a small agency, but most agencies nowadays have investigative software tools. If not, the state, I would hope, has it, and I know that the FBI has it. But there's a process. I mean, there's this intake process where you're bringing this 20,000 tips in. You need a location to store those tips and leads, and then you got to have an ability to start scoring the tips and leads, and those that rise to the surface, assigning them to the investigator. So you got to have a bench that can go out and follow those things up. But then you got to have the ability to monitor the status of all those leads. Have they been vetted? Are they cleared, or do they need further follow-up? And finally, you got to have a process to close the lead out saying we've absolutely addressed this and it's time to move on to the next. So it's a systematic process, but it's something that can be handled with software. Hopefully they've got it. And if not, you can go back to the days when we were young officers and you did it all manually and you reported to your sergeant that I've done it. Well, it's almost incomprehensible to think of how much work has been done and how much is still left to be done, even with the arrest. Now, the police department's done an excellent job of keeping control on this information. In addition to all their statistics, they talked about police investigators conducting more than 300 interviews. That is an incredibly large amount of work. So this case is long from being cold, and if today's arrest holds, it's solved.
So, Mike, we have about 60 seconds left. Is the public interest in this case, and I'm sure there are shades of gray to this, but overall, do you believe it's helping or hurting the investigation?
I think it's absolutely helping to have public interest. Not only is it motivating for law enforcement, but it keeps filling that bucket of tips and leads. The real question becomes, are those in the public passing on tips and leads, or are they trying to make bank on it by advertising it, which absolutely is damaging to the investigation? Yeah. So the plea always is, if you know something, make sure you're calling the police department or the FBI, not putting it out on the air. The forensic examinations continue, and the lab is going to continue to push all that information out, which is going to help build the case. So my thoughts are, what are your thoughts? What do you think Moscow police are doing here? Did they really get the right guy? And is this case going to be saved from falling into the cold case files? Hey, thanks for supporting Profiling Evil and for hitting that like and subscribe button. So what are your thoughts, folks? Let's see what some of the comments are here. We're about 4 minutes out from the press conference intended start time, and I'm going to, as soon as they come in, I'll bring that on and we'll jump to it. I can tell that they're starting to get things kind of rolling on their side. So, and I'm going to just make sure that I've got everything set here. So just be patient with me while I bring it in as a test. And let's see if this works. Yeah, it looks like we're going to be able to get it when the timing is right. So as soon as that starts, we'll jump in. But let's see what some of your comments are. And a lot of comments about whether you would live in or want your children to live in this house after something like that has happened. Just a few weeks ago, while I was in Australia, I went to the home where Betty Shanks was murdered. And of course, that's the subject of season 2 of Mapping Evil with Mike King, is Betty's murder. And by the way, if you haven't seen it, go listen to it. It's great. It's winning all kinds of awards. Just won a global podcast award. Mapping Evil with Mike King, Who Killed Betty? But I went to Betty Shanks, to the house where she was murdered. And I sat down with the family that's been living there since about 5 years after. The original family moved away, sold the house, and the daughter of this couple who lived there, who is now attending the university, said, "Oh yeah, everybody in the neighborhood always called me the girl that lives in the house where Betty Shanks was killed." So, you know, I don't think you ever get past that if you're going to live in a place like this. But anyway, it was kind of interesting. I'm going to actually share some of the clips from those interviews, including taking the person who broke the case with me back to the scene to talk about that murder. So that'll be kind of fun. And that will come out after a 60 Minutes Australia piece that we'll do in the first month or two of February, of the new year. And then once the 60 Minutes piece lands, then I'll share my personal videos from going around and visiting people. So anyway, let's see what kind of comments are here. native New Yorker chick. Yeah, I feel bad for the homeowner. Yeah, it's actually a corporation, so it's apparently owned by a corporation, and yet nonetheless they have a big challenge on their hand. Do they destroy the house, which I don't think insurance would cover, or do they continue to go forward? So looks like the press conference is starting. So let's jump over to that.
Thank you for coming today. Last night, in conjunction with the Pennsylvania State Police, Federal Bureau of Investigation, detectives arrested 28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohlberger in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, on a warrant for murders of Ethan, Zana, Madison, and Kaylee. I want to personally thank these agencies for their assistance in this case. Kohlberger resides in Pullman, Washington, and is a graduate student at Washington State University. We will provide as much information as we can about the extradition to Idaho and the criminal process. However, due to Idaho state law, we are limited in what information we can release today until Kohlberger has his initial appearance in Idaho court. I want to express my appreciation to our local community, the people of Idaho, and those throughout our nation who provided information to help us investigate these murders has been very impressive. We've received over 19,000 tips, and we've conducted over 300 interviews. To recap this case, on the evening of November 12th, Kaylee and Madison arrived home at about 1:56 a.m. after visiting a local bar and street food vendor. Ethan and Zana were at the Sigma Chi house before arriving home around 1:45 a.m. The two surviving roommates had also been in the community but returned around 1 a.m. On the morning of November 13th, a 911 call was made at 11:58 a.m. reporting an unconscious person at the residence. The call came from inside the home from one of the surviving roommates' cell phones. Moscow police responded and found 2 victims on the 2nd floor and 2 victims on the 3rd floor. On November 17th, autopsies were conducted, and the Latah County coroner confirmed the identity of the 4 victims. The cause and manner of death was homicide by stabbing. Some had defensive wounds, and each had been stabbed multiple times. These murders have shaken our community, and no arrest will ever bring back these young students. However, we do believe justice will be found through the criminal process. This was a very complex and extensive case. We developed a clear picture over time, and we stand assured that the work is not done, but be assured the work is not done. This has just started. Since November, we have remained laser focused on pursuing every lead in our pursuit of justice for the victims and their families. I recognize the frustration with the lack of information that's been released. However, providing any details in this criminal investigation might have tainted the upcoming criminal prosecution or alerted the suspect of our progress. We will continue to provide as much information as we can as the process moves forward. Today, I want to specifically thank our dedicated Moscow Police Department detectives, patrol officers, the Idaho State detectives, the Idaho State troopers, and their crime lab technicians and scientists, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation for the resources and personnel to conduct this massive investigation. It was the dedication of them and the persistence and the numerous hours that led to an arrest. Fortunately, these highly skilled people worked together as a cohesive team to solve this case. I also want to thank our community and the nation Over the past 6 weeks, I've been continually reminded of how much our community cares. Locally, public support has been exceptional with kind words, food for investigators, and letters of support. You will never know how much your words of encouragement help us through these trying times. I appreciate each of you and each of your kindness. Agencies and individuals from across the nation have reached out to us to express their support to this department. I'm reminded how our Moscow community, our families, and the nation has been impacted by this daily. Finally, I do want to thank our media partners for the help. You kept this in the news. You helped us with tips. You kept things going, and we truly appreciate that. And you are the product of those 19,000 tips that we received, which is an impressive number. I would like to invite Bill Thompson, the county prosecutor, up at this time.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Bill Thompson. I'm the Latah County prosecutor. And it's sad to be here, but happy to be here at the same time. As Chief Fry indicated, a criminal complaint was filed yesterday here in Latah County, charging the defendant, Mr. Kohlberger, with 4 counts of first-degree murder, in addition to felony burglary, which involves entering the residence with the intent to commit the crime of murder. Mr. Kohlberger, and let me preface, there's a pending case now in court, and I and my office and the investigators have to live with the restrictions that our Supreme Court places on pretrial publicity. That said, I promise you we will share with you through the court process or otherwise whatever we are allowed to. I just appreciate your patience on that. The factual basis for the charges are summarized in what's called a probable cause affidavit that is on file with the court. According to the rules of the Idaho Supreme Court, that is sealed until Mr. Kohlberger is physically back in Latah County and has been served with the Idaho arrest warrant. At that time, we expect that that affidavit will be available to you so you can share the true facts with all of your readers and your watchers and your listeners and all of the people who are interested and really need to know what's going on. So please have patience with us on that. We hope to get that to you as soon as we can. As far as Mr. Kohlberger, I can share with you that he is a graduate student at Washington State University and has an apartment residence over in Pullman. He has had an initial appearance in front of a judge in Pennsylvania. He is being held without bond, and the warrant from our magistrate judge here also provides for no bond. We understand that he's scheduled to be back in court in Pennsylvania next Tuesday afternoon, and that a public defender has been appointed for him there. The process at this point is, since he was arrested in another state, he has the opportunity to either waive extradition and return voluntarily to the state of Idaho, or if he prefers not to waive extradition, then we will initiate extradition proceedings through our governor's office. If we do that, it can take a while for him to get here. So again, I'm asking for your patience and understand that's just the way the system works. Once he gets here, he'll have an initial appearance with our magistrate. They'll deal with issues such as making sure competent counsel is representing him, and the case will be scheduled for further hearings. Your primary source of factual information is going to be the court record, because that's what the Supreme Court says we need to refer you to. So please pay attention to what's going on in court and have people there to watch and hear what's being said. As an attorney, myself and my office, we are limited on what we are allowed by the courts to say outside of the courtroom. So please just work with us. Finally, as the chief indicated, this is not the end of this investigation. In fact, this is a new beginning. Y'all now know the name of the person who has been charged with these offenses. Please get that information out there. Please ask the public, anyone who knows about this individual, to come forward, call the tip line, report anything you know about him to help the investigators and eventually our office and the court system understand fully everything there is to know about not only the individual, but what happened and why. Next, I'll introduce Colonel Ked Wells from the Idaho State Police. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Kedrick Wills. I serve as the director of the Idaho State Police and certainly want to express our appreciation for your attendance here today. These tragic murders took 4 young, vibrant lives from our community. Nothing we do can bring them back. The only thing that we can do in law enforcement to honor their memories that we know of is to bring this to a successful conclusion. This has been a very difficult time for the families, the university, the community, and the state of Idaho. However, it is also proven that communities come together in tough times. Certainly appreciate the support of the local community and our national audience that has been following us as our investigators have worked through this case. I'm thankful also to you, the media partners, who have helped keep this case in the forefront that generates the tips and we hope will continue to generate information that will help us to a conclusion of this proceeding. I'd like to express our appreciation on behalf of the Idaho State Police to Chief Fry, his leadership, and the entire Moscow Police Department for the way that they handled this from the very beginning. He directed the right people to the right positions that led us to this conclusion today. I've had the utmost confidence in this investigation and in Chief Fry, as well as in Mr. Bill Thompson and the Latah County Prosecutor's Office, who've been a great partner throughout this. Nothing has deterred the commitment of the investigators who've worked on this case, regardless of the organization they represent. It's been very trying and very difficult, as you know, that it has been on those investigators as they do the tedious work that they're so good at doing. The partnerships is what's led here as well. The partnerships between Moscow Police Department, I'd like to express our appreciation with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, specifically the special agent in charge out of the Salt Lake City Division, Dennis Rice, and also the work that happened in the last 24 hours in Pennsylvania with the arrest with the Pennsylvania State Police and Colonel Evanchik with the Pennsylvania State Police. We appreciate what they've done across the nation to help us as well. As Bill shared, this investigation is far from over. In fact, I appreciate what he shared, that this is not an ending, but rather a new beginning. The difference now is, as he shared, that we are dictated what information we can share by the court process and by laws in our state of Idaho. And so we will share, as he shared, Mr. Thompson is absolutely committed to share everything he can share through the court process. We've got to make sure that we don't get in front of that process. And we really deeply appreciate everybody's support here. The relationships that were forged here and the partnerships that were forged have led to this. And based on that is why we're here today. And we continue to believe that the best way we can honor these 4 lives that have been taken is to make sure that we have a successful outcome here. One of the partnerships that's been forged throughout this is a partnership with the University of Idaho. And on that, I'd like to introduce the president of the University of Idaho, Mr. Scott Green.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Scott Green, President of University of Idaho. Today's news of arrest is a welcome one. It's relief to our university, our community, and our extended Vandal family. The outpouring of support over the past 6 weeks helped sustain us during the most trying time. It provided the strength that helped us navigate the international scrutiny visited on our students and employees. We are truly thankful for the compassion and acts of kindness shown to our community. Kindness is contagious, and it provided the light that reclaimed ground lost to evil and darkness. We first want to acknowledge and thank Governor Little for the early promise of financial support that enabled the university to secure our campus and focus on helping our students and our employees in the wake of the crimes. We also appreciate the Idaho State Police and the highly visible security presence that brought comfort and calm to a community shocked and confused by the senseless crimes. We never lost faith that this case would be solved and are grateful for the hard work of the Moscow Police Department and their law enforcement partners. Vast and committed FBI resources brought important expertise to this complex case. Across the board, dedicated, highly competent personnel worked this case to arrest. This crime has nevertheless left a mark on our university, our community, and our state. While we cannot bring back Maddie, Kaylee, Zaina, and Ethan, we can thoughtfully and purposefully carry their legacy forward in the work that we do. Our students come first, and that was proven each and every day of this investigation. We are committed to safely delivering the college town atmosphere, campus experience, and high-touch quality education for which the University of Idaho is known. With time, we will heal. We will move forward together, and we will remain Vandal strong. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Chief Fry.
So now we will open the floor to questions. However, I want to remind everyone, as Prosecutor Bill Thompson explained, any factual information regarding the arrest of Kohlberger is currently sealed per Idaho law and will not be released until he has appeared in an Idaho court. Please formulate your questions accordingly. I recognize there are a lot of questions, and I will try to answer as many of them as I can. Is there an evergreen or
Lauren Patterson, Northwest Public Broadcasting, Spokane Public Radio. I realize the records are sealed. I guess I'm not too familiar with how it works, but can you tell us what tip, what lead, what piece of evidence really led you all the way from Idaho to the suspect in Pennsylvania?
As I've said in the past, that's part of our investigation, and we won't be releasing that at this time. We will have those answers. We'll have them as soon as we can make those available to you.
Then a quick follow-up and a two-parter. Is our community safe, or is law enforcement still on the search for other suspects who might be involved in this attack?
What I can tell you is we have an individual in custody who committed these horrible crimes, and I do believe our community is safe, but we still need to be vigilant, right? We still have talked about this in the past. We always need to be aware of our surroundings and make sure that we're aware of what's going on.
Hi, Chief. How soon into the investigation did police and law enforcement begin to spot Mr. Kohlberger as a potential suspect? And a follow-up, how many tips, if you can say, were specifically related to Mr. Kohlberger?
To the tip part, honestly, I can't answer that question, so I'm not even going to speculate on that. On the other part, that's part of our investigation, and it will come out. I'd like the mic to please come right over here.
Thank you. Dana Griffin with NBC News. Can you confirm that Kohlberger asked whether or not anyone else had been arrested when he was in custody?
I cannot confirm that, or I'm not sure of that information, but that would still be a part of our investigation.
Did CODIS initially return any hits on this guy?
That's still part of our investigation. That will come out. If we could get somebody over here, please.
And then one final question. Is there any message to the online sleuths who slandered and harassed people who they believed were responsible?
There was a lot of speculation going on, and we've always said from the very beginning that we're the official message that comes out, and to pay attention to what we're putting out there to the press.
I'm Nancy Liu with News Nation, and we were over at the house this morning, and you told us that the remediation would begin today. It was suddenly stopped. Can you tell us why?
Yes. The house cleanup has been halted, and that came by a legal request from the court.
Christina Corbin, Fox News. Chief, have you identified a motive?
That is part of the investigation, and that will come out as we continue the investigation. But what we still ask is for people to continually send us things in the tip line. We are still looking for more information. We're still trying to build that picture, just like we have stated all along. We're putting all the pieces together, and that will help.
Chief Veronica Miracle with CNN. Any indication that the suspect knew the victims?
That's part of the investigation as well. It won't be something that will come out at this point in time, but as we continue the investigation and as this case goes to trial, that will be brought forth.
Have you spoken to the families? Can you tell us what they've told you today?
Are you talking the victims' families? Yeah, we have reached out to the victim's family as we always do. We've done that daily, and we've continued to have contact with them.
Hey, Nate Sanford. You mentioned earlier that you're still seeking tips about Brian and that people should still share whatever information they have. Can you speak about what specifically people should be reaching out for, like if they know something?
I would say anything and everything. As we've said all along, we know what tips we're looking for. We will take those tips and we will have professionals look at those and decide which pieces of those we need to use for our case. So we ask that everybody would do that.
Angela Palermo, Idaho Statesman. Your department and other investigators on the case took a lot of flack for keeping information close to your chest. Are you glad that you did that? And were you worried about tipping the suspect off?
I will 100% stand behind the way that we handled this investigation. And this all started from day one with our patrol officers arriving on scene, locking down the scene, us calling in the Idaho State Police, us calling in the FBI, and keeping information that was pertinent to this case very, very tight. We want to have a situation where when this goes to trial, there is no doubt that we've done everything right and we've slowed down and we've continued to slow down. We'll continue to do that.
Hey, Chief. Have you guys found the murder weapon or the Hyundai Elantra?
So we are still looking for all pieces of evidence, but we are still looking for the weapon. And I will say that we have found an Elantra.
Stephanie Becker with CNN. Can you tell what it was like when you got the phone call when the police told you that they had your suspect?
I can tell you, for a lot of law enforcement, it was a fairly sleepless couple of days with as we were leading up to everything that we were doing. But what I can tell you is I have faith in those agencies across the nation. I have faith in our officers. I have faith in the FBI, and they did a great job. But sure, there was some times, even throughout the day, that we were always concerned.
Hi, Chief. Don, you're back at CBS News. Can you talk a little bit more about the suspect's connection to Pennsylvania?
All I know is that he lives in Pennsylvania.
Chief Guy Tannenbaum from Nonstop Local KHQ in Spokane. More about the Elantra. We saw reports that you mentioned that you recovered an Elantra, but can you specify where that was found? And we know that that was one of the biggest pieces of information you were asking from the public to tip. Were you able to provide an information on whether those tips led to this seizure of an Elantra?
That's still part of the investigation that will come out in the future.
Chief Glenn Mosley, Idaho Public Radio here in Moscow. The additional police presence in town and on campus, semester's coming. Is that going to continue?
You will continue to see state troopers in the area. You know, we're talking to Latah County as well. You will see a presence of us that we're always have up on campus. We have assigned officers to that. So you will continue to see a law enforcement presence. I'm going to take two more questions.
Hi, Chief. Julie Scott, ABC News. Can you tell us if you eventually had a license plate number to the Elantra and how you tracked it to Pullman?
That's still part of the investigation that will come out.
Chief, hi, Matt Lovelace with the Murrow College of Communication. I want to ask about Mr. Koberger as a graduate student at WSU. Are you aware of if he returned to campus after November 13th? And have you had any communication with departments on the WSU campus about his attendance?
So some of that is going to be followed up as we continue our investigation. We'll be asking some of those questions, but that'll come out in the near future. So what I do want to do is I want to thank you all. You really have been the national voice for us. You've given us the opportunity to get many, many tips. And I do appreciate everything you've done, and we'll continue to look forward to working with you in the future on this. So I'd like to thank you for that, and thank you for your time.
Well, there you go. I think they handled that as expeditiously and efficient as they have many of the things that we've seen since this thing started. And so it'll be interesting. The questions around the extradition, I think Michelle may have responded. Yeah, go back and listen to the bearded guy, the prosecutor. He'll kind of share that. The challenge is going to be whether this guy fights extradition or not. If he fights extradition, it could be a while before he makes his way back to Idaho. If he waives extradition, and that means if he just says, "Yeah, I'll come back and face the charges," then he could be back rather quickly as soon as they can arrange to have him back. So that's going to be what really is important. Then he'll make his first appearance and get arraigned in Idaho, and at that point, then the judge is going to have to make a decision if he's going to release the affidavit or not. I thought one of the really important things that came out, I don't know how you all felt about it, was something that I've kind of yapped about kind of nonstop, and that is these wild accusations that have been made by people, these assumptions with no basis behind them. All of it, I guess, is good for fodder and entertainment, but keep in mind that in a criminal case, that it's necessary that a piece of evidence doesn't stand on its own. So if you think about most criminal cases, there may be an eyewitness account or forensic evidence or physical evidence. There might be eyewitness accounts, confessions. But when prosecutors present these cases, they have things that corroborate other things. And that's outside of even circumstantial, which is, a whole different discussion. And you could go back, if you're members of Profiling Evil Academy, or frankly now those get posted to everybody, go back and look up the forms of evidence and watch the video that I did on the forms of evidence, where we talk about this responsibility not to do something on a single form of evidence. That's really risky, including if that single form of evidence is an eyewitness account, because all of those can be subject to challenge and have problems. So this is going to be interesting to see that when the arrest affidavit comes out, if they release it, we're going to really get step by step what law enforcement believes this particular person who now is alleged to have committed these murders did, and that will be kind of interesting. I don't know if this would be interesting to any of you or not. I love maps, so I'm going to just pull up a map, because I was doing a little looking this morning online, and let's see if I can do this in a way that here we can talk and show. Of course, this is the area in Moscow where the crimes occurred. And if we were to look at this, we see the corner club where the kids were hanging out at the bar in the afternoon till the early morning hours, made their way to the food truck, and then made their way home in the early morning hours. We also know that Chapin and Kernodle were really close to their home here, the murder scene, as they attended that party that was going on into the night. And here's where those kids that a lot of people were blaming for killing these people, including the guy who ran by, again, just speculating wildly. And it's kind of our personality, isn't it? That we want to know answers and we want to have resolution. Sometimes that means we make up stuff to fit this and satisfy this fear we have or this need we have to get answers. But let's just do a little exercise right here real quickly. We know that this suspect, Koberger, was attending the Washington State University in Pullman. So let's just jump over to his address and see what the best route would be for him to go from Pullman over to 1122 King Road in Moscow. And this is a 16-minute drive for this guy. So there's question about, did he go home after it happened? I don't know. But what we do know is that he was seen, or not, I can't say that for sure. So I want to correct that. We do know that there was a white car captured on CCTV cameras at the little gas station located over here off Steiner and Troy. And so we can then theorize. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put Steiner and Troy. So now we can see what the most probable route is from Pullman to the homes where the home where the murders occurred, and then from the location where the murders occurred over to that gas station, if in fact that was the car. So we're just kind of swagging and speculating here, and I hope you don't mind, and I don't want to waste too much of your time. But now let's get him down to the Poconos, and let's just make it easy. We'll just say Scranton, Pennsylvania. Somebody over there is probably going to get mad at me. But let's look at the most probable route that he would have to drive in order to get there if he committed the homicides and then drove from the homicides home. So let's say that this graduate student left school and was heading home for that same long Thanksgiving holiday that other kids were heading for. So as we zoom in on the location of the murders, there's a couple of kind of interesting things here. You'll notice that the most probable route would have been to go back north, which kind of is weird considering that if you look at the video at that gas station that captured the white vehicle, if again that was the suspect, that vehicle was heading southeast or more southbound on Troy. So what I want to do is I want to just change that route a little bit and say, what happens if we follow more the course or the path that he would potentially be traveling to get to Pennsylvania if he were to do it from this direction here. So I'm going to just put the point here and see if we can. So now all of a sudden we can see a route being plotted that takes him from Pullman to the homes where the murders occurred, to where the gas station saw him, and then head a completely different direction. But I'm still a little uncomfortable with that. So I'm going to just swap it out a little bit and say, what about these other roads that are in here? And all of a sudden we start seeing other possibilities for this person, if in fact he is the predator, to be able to travel and make some changes. Again, I don't know if that's worth anything to any of you, so I'll just look and see what you got to say. And then we're going to wrap up because I don't want to waste your evening, but I do want to thank you for taking time to jump on. And I hope that the maps make it a little more easy. They certainly do for me because they cause me to ask more questions. And sometimes they answer questions. And of course, y'all know that I love maps. So, well, folks, I think what we're in is a waiting game until this guy is brought here and arraigned, and that arrest affidavit is released. And that's going to be the real key here. So let's just keep watching this thing together, and we'll see what the next steps are. And again, if I could caution in any way, anything, it would be just to kind of slow down a little bit and don't jump to the conclusions that many people have, including whether a piece of information is valuable evidence or not, because we've seen those things come. They capture lots of attention. They capture a lot of excitement. They're incredibly sensational. And then they're proven to be just a red herring. And it's just a whole lot better to just keep consuming facts. And remember what I always say about Sherlock Holmes and that statement. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has all the facts, for insensibly we spend all of our time twisting facts to fit our theories rather than allowing the facts to unfold and create the answer and theory that accompanies it. Thanks so much for your support of Profiling Evil. I hope you're hitting the like and subscribe button, and I hope you'll come back and watch us. Catch me tonight on News Nation. We're going to be talking about the arrest and some other things, and then we'll get back together real soon. And for those of you who challenged me for being, what did they say? A liberal because I went on News Nation. I had this flashback when I read that. I actually started laughing because at one time I ran as a Republican sheriff for office. I was working in the Attorney General's office, and I was appointed chief of staff to a Democratic Attorney General. I was called into the governor's office. At that time, it was Governor Leavitt, and I was challenged on why I would ever work for a Democrat. And I leaned back and I said, well, all I care about is law enforcement. So folks, don't get spun up if I go on News Nation, or I might even go on CNN, and I might even go on Fox if it gives us an opportunity to share information about the criminal investigative process. So you can catch me on News Nation, you can catch me on Court TV, and I love the opportunity there. And I hope that it brings help to folks who are trying to understand this investigative process and the criminal profiling process. So until we talk again, thanks so much. And thanks for your support of Profiling Evil. We'll see you all soon at the next crime scene.